Hello everyone, and welcome to a Speedpaint / Speedpixel of my latest piece called Towering Tomb. The Towering Tomb is, spoiler alert, a lighthouse where you meet some creepy old zombies and have to defeat them in battle, in glorious battle. So I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of the process of what I'm doing here. So essentially, to start a brand new piece like this, I've picked a colour palette. I have also tried to tie it together with one of the other elements of the game. So this is the Assassin's character card, which you saw a second ago. Behind the assassin is sort of like a sunset scene based on like a cliff, or you sort of stood on a small island and then you can see a cliff in the background with a little bit of a township or something. And so this is the opposite side of that view. Initially I wanted to do it as like a sunset or something like that, but obviously if you're looking at a sunset on the Assassin's character card, you're not going to see the sunset as well looking the opposite direction. So you will see the reverse of a sunset, and I didn't know what that looked like, so I googled it to find out what the reverse of a sunset looked like, and apparently it's all purple and stuff, so that's what you're getting here. Now, funny story about what you could see at this exact point here, just before that cut there, is my wife took the kids out for a little bit of time so that I could just focus completely on actually doing this piece. And after pottering around and making a coffee and doing a couple of bits in the house, I sat down to do the work, and it took me, the first clip that you saw before that break was about 20-25 minutes worth of footage, and I just remember thinking, I hope she doesn't walk in now. Because it just looked so bad for how long. I think at one point she'd been out by about an hour by the time I got sort of 20-25 minutes in, and so I was desperately worried that she'd walk in and be like, the hell have you been doing? It's not doing anything untoward. Not burying bodies in the garden or anything, I promise. Don't watch me, FBI. I was just doing bits and pieces, grabbing a coffee, doing some, and then by the time I got Photoshop loaded, picked my palettes and started sketching it out, it just looked abysmal for 20 minutes worth of work. So we're going on for about, I think this will be the 40-minute mark. So these two clips that you've seen so far are represent about 40 minutes worth of work. So I've just kind of sketched in the sunset clouds that you would see. I think at some point in this video you might see a bit of the reference image. It might be too quick, but then it's time to start blocking out all the elements. So the sunset's in, the reflection's in, a very, very basic sort of sketch of both of those, by the way. But then it's working on the detail of, say, the lighthouse, as you can see now. And so this particular lighthouse was actually inspired by a lighthouse that I have visited in person. It's on Roker Beach in Sunderland in the northeast of England. It's not exact one-for-one copy, but there's like a banding to it that's like a stony colour. I kind of like that. So, and Roker's the place that me and my wife got married. So I thought it'd be a nice little nod to that, for those who know. And now you know, if you're watching this video and you've watched this far, now you know. Now you know where I got married and why the lighthouse has a bit of a brown sandy colour to it. So there we go. And so I wanted to create this magical element for this lighthouse as well. So there's this kind of beam going up into the sky, sort of behind some of the clouds and in front of some of the others as well. Because it's supposed to be fantasy at the end of the day. And one of my favourite things to do is create something with fantasy elements that's very grounded in reality. So this is something I think you could see in person. It's just a lighthouse on an island that might have access some other way, but then adding that sort of beam of energy or arcane light sort of brings that into the fantasy space, which is something maybe it's a personal thing, maybe other people like it too, but I just really enjoy that kind of normal setting with the fantasy elements to it, so it's grounded more in reality, which I realise is quite ironic given that this is all pixel art, but hashtag deal with it. That's what I like. And hopefully it's what you like too, which is why you might be watching this video. So Now this was a little bit tricky because we're looking at the cliffs now. They're supposed to be cliffs, and I realised they look more like a tree trunk, and I think I've just gone with the wrong colour palette or something like that. What I'm trying to do is limit the colours that I use rather than just sort of colour picking, so that when I get more and more artwork out on for the game, you'll see a consistency across things, because I haven't had that colour consistency through most of what's created so far. And so I've created 2 palettes based off, I think I made it ages ago, I think it was based off the old Super Nintendo colour palette, and then I've added some saturation to one and then desaturated another one so that there's a little bit more. So it's based on the SNES one, but it's not entirely a replication of that, so it gives that grounded feeling. So my whole game going forward will be created with all of these colours, and you're going to get some mixing when opacity, you know, blends different colours together and stuff like that, but I am trying to keep that to sort of a minimum where possible. So I'm just detailing in some of this grassy area. It's supposed to look like, you know, when the wind waves over longish grass, it's supposed to look like that. Whether it does or not, I guess, is in the eye of the beholder, because I think I change it anyway. But then, yeah, you get this sort of like foreground bit as well. A little bit of the greenery, and I think that green was probably a bit too yellow, but, you know, we're sticking with it. Spent too much time on this bit, to be quite honest. Just watching it back thinking, was this necessary? Maybe, maybe not, who knows. And moving on to some more of the detail of the light. So one of the things in terms of the process behind all of this as well, that I think you might find interesting, is that it's a lot about sort of blocking in all of these colours and blocking in most of what you want on there, so it reads visually as kind of where you want to go, a bit like a sketch. So there is a sketch to this in a sketchbook somewhere, I don't know where, but it was based on a sketch that I did years ago. And so when you do that sketch, you then put that into a pixel art and just block it all out with solid colour, you kind of get a sense for how the piece is going to go, and then it's quite easy to kind of flit back and forth between doing detailed bits and sort of fleshing out those annoying little bits that don't quite look right, and then blocking out the larger bits so that it's more readable from an early perspective. So this, I'm going back and looking at the cliffs because I just wasn't happy with them. I think it looked too much like tree bark, and so we're rounding out all these rocks to look a bit more in keeping with the video games it's inspired from. So I was quite happy at that point. So then we zoom back in, and now we're just going to pick out some of the detail of those rocks, because they don't look like rocks yet, I don't think. But here we go. So going around the corner and just sort of shading in the backside of these rocks now, because I'm imagining the light's coming sort of from the left of the scene, which is what that coloured banding is up the lighthouse. That's kind of supposed to represent the light wrapping around and hitting that front side. And this was quite tricky because I was looking at reference images at the same time for pixel art cliffs and seeing what that could look like for my version, because a lot of people have done this stuff much better than I have. Years gone by, you know, since the 80s, pixel art's been about. So trying to look at reference images and keep referring to that, and obviously I can't record both screens or show you it in a fashion that I'm happy with, so you're stuck with just seeing the finished piece in a couple of pauses here and there. So going around the island and just sort of bedding that into the ocean a little bit, and then trying to highlight some of these ripples a little bit more now that, you know, we need the detail and we need the depth. And what I really enjoyed about this actually was using lots of colours I wouldn't normally use. So the purples reflecting the sky, and the oranges, and really bright, vibrant colours. I often go for the bright, vibrant anyway, obviously it's pixel art. But I've been, like I said before, I was colour picking a lot of this. So it was just whatever colour I fancied. And so now using a colour palette, it means that you've got these strong kind of contrasts between each colour. And I've been trying where possible to blend these. I'm doing it in increments of at the most 25%. So you can see there that little pink across that, or that purpley pink across the bottom of that top cloud there, is a 50-50 mix of that pink and the purple behind it. So it's not, I'm not creating billions upon billions of colours. There we go, that's my reference image. So I don't want to copy it one for one neither, because why would you? It's not meant to be real, it's meant to be a representation. Some people might like that, I wasn't sure. So again, a little bit more of that darker, deeper purple in the top. And I love looking at the tiny navigator view up in that top right corner. I think it looks, visually it reads from a distance exactly what I was hoping it would look like. So now I'm just checking to see whether the actual framing is good enough, and I think, yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. That's kind of the composition I want for the story card. It fits just nicely. It's resized to the right kind of size that I want. So we're going back and we're just adding more details now. And this is where it gets really, really detailed. Obviously the broader strokes of the top cloud, not so much, but we're going into all these clouds now. And looking at, obviously I'm recording this retrospectively. I'm thinking, I wish I'd just done what I ended up doing much quicker, because I think the orange is too heavy, and it's very, very sort of centered. So the weight of that orange is kind of right in the middle of the piece, which isn't supposed to be the focal point. The focal point's meant to be the lighthouse. And so going in and sort of trying to create a little bit more uniformity to some of these clouds, getting a bit bored of it and thinking, this could be better. I love the sort of like reddish orange, and the orange as well. The colour itself is lovely. I just wasn't happy with how I distributed it across across a lot of this. And I think I spent way too long trying to figure it out, because looking at the reference image again, I couldn't figure out the sort of uniformity to all the clouds and how it all kind of came together. It's obviously a very random nature. And so trying to emulate that in pixel art, when my experience of drawing or painting sunsets is limited anyway, was a real challenge. And I hope you can agree that I think I pulled it off just about. But you can see now I'm getting a bit more destructive, because it was just I was thinking this is just too much. There's too much orange, too much weight in the middle. We need to see that the lighthouse is kind of the key focal point here. And so it was really just a little bit of trial and error at this point, trying to think, does this go here, does this go here, how does the light hit the cloud, what does the cloud actually look like in 3D space. I know that the light is coming from the back of this, lighting up the clouds from more or less underneath, so that's why you get those kind of yellowy highlights on the bright orange at the bottom, just to sort of bring a bit more reality to the scene. And then get bored of the clouds because they were doing my head in. It's a real process here of going through and just checking and going through, checking again. Yeah, this whole clip's about 3 hours long. I think it's took me 3, maybe 4, and it's over. Oh God. Probably only a couple of days actually. This one, it was quite a quick turnaround. When you're trying to do things that quickly, it can be very, very challenging to just push through and think, I've just got to do it. And so you can't sit there and take a break and come back to it a week later. I'm on a really tight schedule, so I want to make sure that this is all done quickly. So there's always a balance of make it exist first, is one of my favourite things I see online at the minute, is make it exist first, make it good later. Which goes back to my point about blocking in all those colours from the start. It's like, make it exist first, then make it good. Because if you don't make it exist, how can you refine it and how can you make it good? One thing I did really enjoy was kind of creating all these ripples and adding a bit more form around the island, because that made more sense to me and my little monkey brain. You can think, right, okay, well, if that island is this particular form, then physically the water will take this form. And if there's little blocks of, little lumps of land, then the ripples are going to go around the land, and there's more structure to that. Whereas the sky, I think, I can't imagine what structure clouds take. They're just kind of sausages, I guess. Like lines of water vapor. What does that even look like? How do you even draw that? So this was a huge learning curve for me. If any of you watching this who have some tips on how to pixel art sunsets, then please, by all means, drop me an email or a comment or whatever, because I think I wouldn't mind a few tips. Wouldn't mind a few tips at all. So you can see I'm adding a little bit more structure, some longer lines, because there's a lot from the original sketch that wasn't, it was obviously just a drop in the colour as quickly as possible type of thing. So going back in and working through these angles and trying to pull it all in, so again it kind of compositionally points to the middle as well, messing around with some of the blending. And then I was unhappy with how the dithering looked on here, so I wanted to add a bit more of a random element to it. And then the sky, I remember thinking the sky looked a little bit blank, so I wanted to bring the two elements together of this kind of darkness to the end, because the actual text for the piece is something along the lines of you see a lighthouse in the distance, what feels like the edge of the world. And so I wanted to have nothing beyond the lighthouse apart from the ocean, because it's not the end of the world, we all know that, but back in fantasy times where people were less educated than we are, although flat earthers exist, so who knows, they would look at the edge of the world and think, well, that's the edge of the world, it just drops off. But it doesn't, it's just the curvature that stops seeing that. So I wanted to add some of these curves in with this dithering to kind of give you that feeling of continuing on, so we know as viewers that there's more to it. But from an adventurer's perspective, they're not going to know that. And you wouldn't have known that if I hadn't told you, so there you go. You got a little bit of insider knowledge behind the reasoning behind a lot of this stuff. So now I think it's about 40 minutes later I've decided, yep, okay, it's time to revisit the sunset. I've done everything else. Time to bite the bullet 20 minutes later, 40 minutes later, whatever it was. And really just sort of add a couple of elements, get bored, go to the lights. I always find stuff like this really fun. Trying to blend different options together and thinking, how would the light interact with, the volumetric lighting in the scene, and how would it interact with the air? And there's a lot to consider when you're doing artwork of this nature. So rather than just letting Photoshop do the work for me, I've decided to kind of hand pixel it instead, because I'm obviously a glutton for punishment. And I think the pattern I ended up using made it look a bit more like a magical light instead of just like a natural light, which is kind of what I was going for. There's an element of pattern to it, I guess. So this was, there was always supposed to be like an access point to the island, so I thought, right, let's sketch in a bridge. See how we do the bridge. And spoilers, guys, spoiler alert, I didn't like it. I really didn't like it. I thought it was a good idea if you could pull it off. I don't think that I have the skill just yet to kind of do that. So I messed around, just did a hint of a boat and a little cave at the bottom with a ladder coming up. Because there was always ladders in old video games. There's always like a ladder with a black hole, and it would just lead somewhere. And that's kind of what I went for instead, and just put a little garden path into this lighthouse. So the idea is you get a boat from the nearby town that you can see in the assassin's card. The little boat would then take you to this cove that would then just be a giant ladder up to the island, rather than having the practical element of upkeep of a bridge. It's a little bit easier to just get a boat. You can fix boats, but yeah, fixing a bridge is tricky. So that's pretty much it. That is pretty much just a little bit more of the detail in there. I remember thinking, so when you zoom out, you don't get that full effect, obviously, with the speed of the video. But when you zoom out, you can see that some of these lines are a little bit too straight. So now I'm just going to show you the different elements on the different layers. So that's the sky, the ocean, then the foreground, then the cliff details, then the lighthouse, and then the sunset, and then the reflection in the water. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you've stuck around so far, really appreciate it. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.